Welcome to The Long Way Round. I'm your host, Malcolm Byrne, and you're listening to Radio Kingston WKNY 107.9 on your FM dial, 1490 AM, and on the internet at radiokingston.org. And tonight we're very pleased to welcome back to the show my dear friend and host of the Garland Nixon YouTube channel, Garland Nixon. Welcome, Garland. How you doing, brother?
Oh, hey, great to be back, Malcolm. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, well, I mean, we saw each other a couple of months ago, and it seems like about a million years actually since I last saw you. So many things have happened, since where was it, at the peace event down in the city, trying to stop World War III.
Yeah, how about that? Between that and I think I might have seen you at some Assange events, and we bump into each other here and there. Yeah. So, Garland, I've been, I'm a bit overwhelmed because on the one hand, it just seems like the whole situation with Ukraine has just kind of it's like, what? Ukraine, what? Zelensky, who? You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Because, what's going on with Israel and Gaza is just such a horrific and consequential event. But nonetheless, I mean, as our mutual friend Scott Ritter pointed out just yesterday, things are still going on in Ukraine. And I thought before we, touch on any other subjects, let's kind of rewind and see where we're at with that situation. In terms of, this is still an ongoing conflict, and, some of the predictions that we've made back in, almost 2 years ago seem to be coming true. You want to weigh on that subject? Yeah, well, the important thing about number one about Ukraine is for people to understand what's really going on here. The people who run, and I'll always use this term, the U.S. empire. There's a book out that I would advise people to get, How to Hide an Empire. And it is, if the American people understood that they were in an empire and not a nation, they could understand the foreign policy much better, imperialism, etc. But the bottom line is, Ukraine was not about Ukraine. It really even wasn't about Russia. It was about a long-standing plan, the Wolfowitz Doctrine, that basically said if any country tries to rise powerful enough that it can stand against the U.S., the United States' ability to control everything, to have full hegemonic power over the world, then the United States will have to find a way to knock that down. And there's been writings going on for many years that said, if we can utilize Ukraine, that is like the most significant security issue to Russia. We can utilize that to disrupt and disable Russia. And then once Russia, we can effect regime change in Russia, and then we have access to all of the natural resources that Russia has, and then we can move on to China, and then we can disrupt and disable China. And in the end, the bottom line is we still run the world. So if you just look at it and say, well, there's bad guys and good guys, and Putin's a bad guy and we're the good guy, then you've been had. So ultimately what happened was, and this is how we got here. Mm-hmm. The people that run the country basically looked at it like this. Here's what we're going to do. We'll get this war. We'll overthrow the government of Ukraine, which they did. We will weaponize the Ukrainian military. We'll make it very, very powerful. We'll give it lots of weapons. We'll get it all ready to fight Russia. We'll get a war started with Russia. And then we can have a huge, major economic sanctions against Russia. That'll destabilize Russia. They'll turn against their leaders. They'll throw them all out. And then we can come in and put in a puppet government. How perfect. It didn't work. Russia's economy had been prepared for just such a sanctions regime against them. The sanctions didn't work, and ever since the U.S. has been trying, we'll just weaken Russia. We'll drag them into this long morass, into this Afghanistan-style slog, and then they will weaken. None of it worked. It didn't work. And so now that it didn't work, the U.S. is stuck with we've got this war going on that we wanted to use to disable, to overthrow, and to take power in Russia, and none of it worked. How do we get out of it? And number one, but not only how do we get out of it, how do we get out of it and still not lose face and still maintain the option in the future to get back into it, because we still got to destabilize Russia, or else how are we going to run the world and control the world and maintain power? Bottom line is this. Russia took it slow, as they tend to do, very, very slow. They fought slow. And now, in my opinion, my evaluation, the Ukrainian military and political, as many of us predicted, is on the verge of collapse. The U.S. and its allies cannot afford, for any number of reasons, can't afford to prop them up anymore, can't afford to pay all their bills, can't afford to continue to send them military hardware, and it is in a slow collapse. And at some point, it's going to be maybe a sudden debacle style collapse. And that's where we are. They're still fighting. But there are a lot of articles coming out now about infighting within the Ukrainian political sphere. There's a couple of articles come out the last couple of days about the Europeans now talking to the Ukrainian government saying, hey, you're going to have to start thinking about some kind of a peace deal with Russia. The problem is Russia doesn't need a peace deal. We do, because they're winning the war. You don't need a peace deal. All you have to do is keep doing what you're going to do, what you're doing, and you're going to get everything you want. So the only possible peace deal with Russia would be give them an unconditional surrender, because they don't have to worry, because they're going to get that at some point anyway. And that's where we are. The neocons, the people that run the U.S., trying to figure out how to get out of this Russia thing without just doing an unconditional surrender. And that's going to be about the only way out.
Mm-hmm. Where do you think Zelensky fits into this picture at this point?
Well, there was a recent article in Time. Now, Time is the same magazine that stated that he was the Time Magazine Man of the Year. They tried to make him into some Winston Churchillian kind of figure. But now the latest article about him makes it clear that the position of the U.S. is that he's going to lose, and he's got to start thinking about working out a deal. But they're starting to berate him. They're starting to vilify him. They're starting to basically say he's not a good leader. He doesn't know what he's doing. His cabinet's falling apart. Which he's not really a leader. He's just a puppet anyway. But the bottom line is they're looking for a way out. I suspect that one way or the other, he's going to lose power and they're going to install someone new. The problem that Zelensky has is like the mafia. The guy who's in the most danger is the guy that knows too much. Zelensky knows too much. He's been talking to Biden and Sullivan and Newland. He knows all the conversations that have been had. If he should get angry, he could spill the beans that would get a lot of people in trouble. If I were Zelensky, let's just say I would be extremely concerned about my physical safety.
Sort of a Jeffrey Epstein situation almost.
How about that? Yes, exactly. He knows too much. And I mean, the guy that knows too much, he may just say, I'm not going to say anything, but I don't know that they take the chance. So I wouldn't want to bet on the longevity of Volodymyr Zelensky. Oddly enough, paradoxically enough, the safest thing Zelensky could do would be to run over to the Russians and say, hey, guys, if you keep me alive, I'll spill the beans and tell you everything. Because I think if he sticks around on the side that he's on, he's going to meet into quite possibly he will, let's hope not. I don't wish bad things on anybody, but the possibility is that he could meet an untimely demise.
Well, that kind of leads to my next question, I suppose, is nature, as we know, abhors a vacuum. And say, for example, he were to, quote, abdicate his position. What kind of who or what might fulfill that role? I mean, are we looking at a more militaristic government in Ukraine?
Well, see, there's a problem. The U.S. has a problem with the leadership of Ukraine, because what they did was, when they installed the government in Ukraine, they empowered the most idealistic, far-right, ultra-nationalist people that they could find. One may argue that aligns with the leadership of the U.S. empire, looking at recent things that they've done. But whatever the case, so they align these people who have they empowered these extremely powerful, ultra nationalist forces who, proudly very, very proudly display the iconography and utilize the language of the Third Reich. So in putting those people in power, those are not the kind of people that strike a bargain. If you say to them, okay, they hate the Russians with a racial kind of hatred, such as the people whose political legacy that they proudly display. So they hate the Russians with a racial hatred, right? It's going to be very difficult to get people of that ilk to say, those Russians that you hate, that you call names, you call them orcs, and they should all be done away with, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. Well, can you make a deal with them? And oh, by the way, you're going to be on the short end of that deal. Good luck with that. So they, I don't know how the U.S. gets out of this. I think they just try to bargain with the Russians. They won't be able to bargain with the Russians because they won't be able to offer the things that the Russians have to have in order to get a deal. And at some point, this project simply collapses. And this is the way I put it. This is an easy one if you look at it this way. The U.S. went into Vietnam and said, we've got to stop the communists from taking power. We were there for a while. We ran the heck out. The communists took power. The U.S. went to Afghanistan and said, we've got to stop we cannot let the Taliban stay in power. So we've got to stop them. They went in there for 20 years. They left the Taliban's in power. You are what your record says you are. It is my guess that the U.S. will hightail out of there at some point, a la, the Saigon embassy and, of course, Kabul airport with people dangling off the fuselage of a C-130. And at that point, the Russians will be in power in Ukraine in whatever fashion they want to. I suspect we're going to see just another version of Afghanistan and Vietnam at some point.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things, to go back kind of, let's go back to say 2014 here, to discuss the narrative that often comes up because it's still fairly deeply ingrained in many Westerners' minds, that essentially, I'm going to hit the nail square in the head, that Russia's invasion was unprovoked, and that essentially this is a power grab, and this is an expansion of. Well, let's assume, for argument's sake, that Vladimir Putin is the new Stalin, and that essentially we're trying to reestablish the Soviet Empire, and that if Ukraine falls, then it's going to be the Baltic states, and then it's going to be Poland, and blah. You know how the line goes.
Yeah. The domino theory is what they said in Vietnam. Same thing. If Vietnam falls, then everybody will fall.
But say for argument's sake, I did read that Time magazine article, and it kind of finishes off by essentially saying that, Volodymyr Zelensky is still not prepared to acquiesce on any level whatsoever in terms of sort of a peace negotiation that would include the acknowledgement of, Crimea is never going to be part of Ukraine again. And then also the Donbass, which is the 4 independent oblasts in the Eastern Territory, that those are now essentially going to be part of the Russian Federation. Do you think that that's where Russia's going to stop, is what I'm saying?
When it comes down to it, Russia will stop wherever they choose to stop. I suspect they'll take most of Ukraine east of the Dnieper River. I suspect they'll take Odessa. But the reality is, at some point, when the Ukrainian military collapses, it won't matter. The Russians will take whatever they want, and no one will be able to stop them from taking it. The interesting thing about the whole narrative about, Russia being the empire, it is, there's a term in psychology, deny, project, attack. It's not me, it's you, and I'm going to attack it for you, right? I'm going to attack what is in me that I, projecting onto you. I'm going to attack that and say, you're the bad guy, not me. 2014, the U.S., had bragged, Victoria Nuland had bragged that she'd spent $5 billion in Russia. The U.S. has spent, in Ukraine, doing, quote, democracy building. We did all of this, billions and billions of dollars in Ukraine. The United States in 2008 in Bucharest in April, there was a what do you call it? There was a NATO meeting, and at that meeting, the U.S. basically said, "Hey, at some point, we're going to bring Ukraine into NATO." Now, Angela Merkel was against it; others were against it, and they said then, if you bring Ukraine into NATO, that means war with Russia. They knew it. They knew it. That would be like, Russia saying, we're going to overthrow the government of Mexico and install a puppet government and start building. No, that would mean war. That's basically what we did. So the U.S. said that. Russia said, that's a red line. In fact, the current director of the CIA, William Burns, wrote a famous cable, and you can find it. WikiLeaks released it. It was called "Nyet Means Nyet," nyet being the Russian word for no. And basically what he said was, I can't find anybody in Russia, the most liberals, everybody, people that hate Putin, it doesn't matter. I can't find anybody in Russia that doesn't say Ukraine is the reddest of red lines. And if you go into Ukraine, we're going to war. So they knew that. John Mersheimer said, yeah, you guys do this. Russia's going to come in and smash Ukraine to pieces. So the idea that Russia and China could overthrow the government of Mexico and start building bases, and the United States would just sit there on their hands, makes as much sense as the U.S. moving into Ukraine, putting in a puppet government, and Russia sitting there and allowing that to happen. And the idea that the United States was in Ukraine spending billions of dollars on, quote, democracy building, that suddenly in 2014, 2 weeks before this Maidan Square uprising, Victoria Nuland, who was the Assistant Undersecretary of State, was caught on tape. It's on YouTube. You can listen to it right now. 2 weeks before the government of Ukraine changed in a violent uprising, the Undersecretary of State for the United States was recorded naming who the new government was going to be. So my question would be, if it was organic, A, how did you know 2 weeks before the government was overthrown that it was going to be overthrown? And what gave you the idea that you could name the new government? And last but not least, coincidentally, the very government that she named was the new government that took power. Now, let me add this. So one might say, oh, no, the United States government had nothing to do with overthrowing the government, even though our State Department was caught naming the new government before the coup. And immediately after the coup, right? So a new government comes into power in Ukraine in 2014, and it is immediately the country is flooded with Americans out of the Obama administration. Cofer Black, former CIA assistant chief, comes in along with Hunter Biden, and all of a sudden they're on the board of directors for one of the largest gas companies in the country. Another guy named Amos Hochstein, you can look him up. Amos Hochstein was working for the State Department. He quit his job for the State Department immediately after the coup and joined the board of Naftogaz, which is the state-run gas company for Ukraine. Ukraine was then flooded with Americans. Joe Biden came to Ukraine and immediately took power and started running the whole country. Now, we're supposed to believe that the United States government had nothing to do with the coup. However, immediately after the coup, the United States started running the entire country. So that would be absurd. Yes, the United States couped the government of Ukraine, installed a puppet government, and began immediately. And what did they do? They began digging trenches and preparing for war with Russia immediately after they overthrew the government. So the idea that the U.S. had nothing to do with it is preposterous. Now, let me add this. So people say Putin took Ukraine, took Crimea at that point. Well, here's what you have to know. Russia started building the Crimea naval base in the 1780s, under Catherine the Great. Russia built that in Crimea, that same Crimea naval base. Russia took full control of it, final and full control in 1805. So the idea that 1914, a base that they had been controlling since 1805, that they were going to give up when the U.S. took the country of Ukraine is preposterous. Let me add one other thing. They did a poll, they had a vote. 96% of the Ukrainians, most of who speak Russian, said, yeah, we want to be under the Russia. So the Crimeans. So now the Crimeans vote and they say, we want to be under Russia, not under Ukraine. And Russia says, okay. Now, and now here's what people say. The Russians overthrew the government of Crimea. Well, not one person died. There was no firefights. There was no military activity. There was nothing. First of all, the Russians were already in Crimea, and most of the people in Crimea speak Russian. So you've got a bunch of ethnic Russian people there. Yeah. So I'm just saying, Putin didn't take Crimea. He was already there, and they all spoke Russians. And in order for the Ukrainians, the Crimeans have literally said, if the Ukrainians try to take us back, we'll fight to the death. So the only way for Zelensky to take Crimea back is to kill all the people in Crimea, because they'll fight to the death.
Great. Welcome back. Thank you, Nick Pankin, for holding down the fort there. And also, I'd like to say thanks very much to our producer, Liz Hill. Liz, if you're listening, we love you. Garland, I wanted to add, Garland Nixon, by the way, is my very special guest tonight, host of the Garland Nixon show. And Garland, I wanted to ask you, I know you're not a military expert, but you do have a weekly warrior update with our friend Scott Ritter. What is your perception of the military situation on the ground in Ukraine at this moment?
The Ukrainian military is in big trouble. There are some large areas where they're being surrounded by the Russians. They are running short of supplies. They're running short of ammunition, and the United States has made it clear we're sending our ammunition to Israel from now on. One of the biggest problems they're having is the loss of soldiers. So they're running short of manpower. They're running short of ammunition. They don't have a Air Force to speak of anymore. They can, maybe take off a plane every now and then. And let's face it, if you're facing Russia, you're facing a superpower, and your Air Force has been devastated and your airfields are gone, the war's over. Effectively, they're being punched regularly by Russia, but Russia is not launching major. It seems to me, just my opinion, that Russia is intentionally dragging it out. But whatever the case may be, Ukraine's in deep and serious trouble right now. The question is not whether they're going to lose. The question is, when does the situation collapse? Because I think we're looking at some point at military collapse. That's the inevitability here. I'll put it like this.
Well, I mean, I guess, the reality of that is kind of frightening, though. I mean, given that Ukraine has been soaked with weaponry, and we've got some pretty crazy people in the background over there. I mean, it just seems like we've just done what America seems to be really, really good at, is creating failed states. And then the inevitable blowback that comes from that, it just seems like a kind of a very, very, I have to say, and you're an expert on this. I mean, this all seems like kind of like there must be some people that have a sense of this being what the desired outcome will be. Am I crazy or what?
Well, let me tell you about that, because that is a discussion amongst people. But, that is the discussion as we watch the neocons, as we watch the warmongers and the ruling elite. And the question always goes in one of two directions. Are they so stupid and inept that they're bungling their way through this thing, or are they so brilliant that they're playing 3D chess and we didn't know they're planning all of it? And this is exactly. I have a friend who was a guy who I know well, who was at one point in his life, he was a conservative, and he actually ran, I believe it was the editorial department, because he and I had this discussion for the Washington Times. And he said to me, Garland, let me tell you something. And because we had this specific conversation, and he said, during the Bush administration, and he named Kenny Adelman and all of these neocons over at the Pentagon that he was regularly in touch with. And he said, I had lunch with these people. I talked to these people regularly, right? And he said, and when people always would ask, are they that brilliant that this is a planned outcome? And he said, no, these people are idiots. It is not that they're so smart that they're playing 3D chess, and they are fools. And what happens is they screw things up and things go in a certain way, and they try to then claim, that's what I wanted to happen. But there was like an old joke with Pee Wee Herman or something that I meant to do that. That's pretty much them. These people are hapless bunglers. And when things fall apart, they just say, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I meant to happen. I meant for this country to collapse and for us to be hanging on the side of Huey helicopters leaving the embassy at the end. Yeah, that was the plan. No, they're fools. This is not planned at all. But let me add this. But what we're seeing is the people that they're dealing with, the Putins, the Sergei Lavrovs, the Xis, the leaders of Iran, though we demonize them and we can convince the American people that these people are just madmen, they're just crazy people, they're insane, they're all insane, right? And they have no idea what they're doing. Those people are not fools. They're not stupid. But the people that that are running this country right now, Biden and Blinken and that crew, the ideologues, this is just pretty much another iteration of the Wolfowitz Pearl team under George Bush. That's all it is. Just a new iteration of that. Only even more reckless.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might have been you that said this on one of your shows. It's like we're, how did you put it? It's like we're on the Titanic heading towards an iceberg and no one's steering the boat.
Exactly. And all they're doing is, we need a new narrative. Hey, we're heading straight to straight towards the iceberg. What do you want to do? Let's come up with a new narrative. We'll release that and we'll convince everybody that all is good and we're heading for Bermuda, that we're going to be docked any minute. That's their plan. Their plan is always just come up with a new narrative. It doesn't matter. And if they can convince people that we're heading to Bermuda, they'll figure out what happens when they get to the iceberg when they hit it. They'll come up with a new narrative when they hit the iceberg. That's about all they know how to do.
But doesn't it? I mean, look, the whole world is obviously watching, and I think this is something that perhaps Colonel Douglas McGregor had said on. I think he almost goes on at least twice a week with Andrew Napolitano, and he'd said, the whole world is looking at this, and they're seeing that America is just weaker and weaker and weaker, and this is just sort of, how is that possibly serving America's interests in any sort of way, shape, or form?
Well, and it's not just weaker. They're seeing that America is reckless. Right. They're seeing that America is arrogant and just reckless, foolish, arrogant, out of control. They're looking at America and they're shaking their heads saying those people have lost their minds. And they're right. The people that we have in charge are not competent to, Joe Biden, Blinken. Look at what they're doing. Everything they touch, they set on fire. They have no idea how to deal with these things, and they don't seem to be able to think about the results of their actions. When I think about how these people are, it's a narcissistic and sociopathic empire. The leadership of our country are really acting in a manner, and I mean in the aggregate of the leadership together, not just one person, to create an empire that is narcissistic and sociopathic, that has no concern for the outcome of its actions, for the ramifications of what they do. They just stumble ahead. And then they say, if I do this, they'll greet us with flowers, right? If I do this, this will happen. And it doesn't happen, and then they just come up with something else. It's a pretty sad state of affairs, but they're stumbling downhill, and they're just happy to be able to try to convince the American people as best they are that they're actually heading uphill.
Well, I want to, speaking of complete psychopaths and lunatics, I think we should, because the issue. Obviously, the other thing that the Time magazine had pointed out was that Zelensky is kind of freaking out because, he's like, well, wait a second, all this money that we were getting and these weaponry, now it's going to Israel. And so that's a subject that I want to start to talk about. But before we get into that, I'd like to because I wasn't sure what we were going to play on the show, and I have a playlist here. I'd like to play a track to segue into the Middle East debacle. This is a track by DAM. It's called "I Don't Have Freedom." So we're going to listen to that, and we'll be back with Garland in a second.
يس قدام تعال شوفكم تحموا شوي دينا فوق مع الدربكة لحظة لا لسه عبد أكتر فوليوم خلينا نستحمى شوي هلا مع الدربكة انتي وين ما أروح بشوف عايشين ورا سجون البنود اللي ساجنين أنا ما يتغير مش حاسين ولا نور الأسياج منها إحنا شايفين سما لونها أزرق غيمة أبيض منه استشمات سكرات جدا مخير أنا صامد عايش متفائل ما تعزل مني الأمل بيجي ضرف عسل ولو إنسوا يريدوا أنا مربوط فلسطين جايين لحفل الطابور بالأرض جذور شجر زيتون ضل تولد وتجدد وتجدد غصون ممدود للسلام معروض لاحتلال ما يريد استسلام طب ليه أنا اللي ما إله حرية اللي لفوق وين ما أروح بشوف حدود سجن الإنسانية لأطفال العالم حرة وأنا مالي حرية وين ما أروح بشوف حدود سجن الإنسانية لأطفال العالم حرة وأنا مالي حرية إحنا بندور على السلام بين قوة حرب رواح حرب ما مصرنا ولا حرب نطلب الحرية من السجون المانية إن نكون معيون دائما معمية للتفرج أطفال العالم الحرة دائما نضل بتدحرج للحياة المرة وقواتنا شاطرين بس بتبارج الكلام كلهم ماخدين تخرج بتعرج الأوضاع وإحنا نستعمل قوة عشان الضعف بنتحمل الموت عشان الحياة تعملنا بالقطة للحياة ولدنا ولما لقيناها مش بيدينا جربنا ناخدها فمتنا كل اللي طلبناه كان نفس اللي ضحينا عشانه برضه كان نفس انت قولي ليه أطفال العالم حرة وأنا مالي حرية وين ما بشوف سجن الإنسانية لأطفال العالم حرة وأنا مالي حرية وين ما بشوف سجن الإنسانية لأطفال العالم حرة وأنا مالي حرية أنا بديش أعيش كبير وأنا بديش أموت عشري وأنا لسه شايف الاحتلال مادت إيد رضا مثل السلام مش مساواة بل تهديني حبل مشنقة وكمان وجدار اللي فاصل بيني وبين حالي اللي ما مخلينا أشوف ضوء السماء الواحد هو 50 ولاية ربي كمان ولاية اللي تربى على حساب غيرها متأثرة من إمها الهنود الحرة متأملة تمحينا تغسل دماغنا تقولنا إنه المشكلة هي إحنا بس حتى جيوش العالم كلها ما تقدر على الحرية وين ما بشوف حدود سجن الإنسانية لأطفال العالم حرة وأنا مالي حرية وين ما بشوف حدود سجن الإنسانية لأطفال العالم حرة وأنا مالي حرية
وين ما أروح بشوف حدود سجن الإنسانية لأطفال العالم حرة وأنا مالي حرية نريد جيلا غاضبا نريد جيلا يفرح الآفاق وينتش التاريخ من جذوره وينتش الفكر من الأعماق نريد جيلا قادما مختلف الملامح لا يغفر الأخطاء لا يسامح لا ينحني لا يعرف النفاق نريد جيلا رائدا عملاق
شكرا لعنات شكرا لكم عنات إخبارية
All right, that was DAM with a track called "I Don't Have Freedom." And Garland, just for your information, that's a Palestinian rap band.
Oh, wow.
Rap group. Yeah, they actually do have rap bands. And some great stuff, actually. I at some point, I might call up a track by this young 12-year-old kid called MC Abdul. The track is called "Shouting at the Wall." It's an amazing track. But
wow.
Anyway, the reason I wanted to segue into that is because, you know, I think that this situation with, well, let me start off by saying this is a qualifier that I'm not anti-Semitic. Okay, I just want people in the audience to understand that nobody who's having this conversation is anti-Semitic, and that there's a huge difference between Judaism and the distinction with Jewish people and the country of Israel and Zionism. Those are distinct things. And right now, I believe that what we have is an out of control situation in Israel because of these lunatics that are running the country. And Garland, I want you to sort of run with that idea and talk about it, because I'm so just at my wit's end here, and many people are.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about this is that, for people like you and I, those of us who have been following the situation, this is not new. We see the brutality, we see the level of devastation and the death, et cetera. And certainly, we are shaken to the core, but we understand that over the course of years, this is what's been happening, that Palestine has been under an economic siege, it's been militarily, if you just talk to anyone that's been there and you understand this is a very, very bad situation, and the world should be aghast at how this has been going on for years. And now, at a time when Israel has been taken over realistically by a theocracy, and by a very brutal theocracy, a very far right wing, my position, certainly I know I'm not speaking for you or Radio Kingston, and I don't use this word often, but I do believe that when you look, even I was saying this prior to it, that this Israel, you could argue that they have a fascist government. And fascist governments, one of the foundation of a fascist government is a dedication to war. And now what we have is a situation where we have a city that is walled in and the people can't leave the city. And there seems to be a reckless disregard for the lives of civilians. That's the way I see it. And the United States, as they have time and again, is supporting those and an extremist government that is committing a massive murder of civilians. Now, this is nothing new. I've made this statement. What the Israeli government is a junior partner in this mass murder thing. If you look at Libya, you look at Syria. Look at the numbers. Syria, 600,000 to 700,000. Libya, hundreds of thousands. 1 million in Iraq, 2.5 million in Vietnam. If you look at the actual numbers, what the number of people that Israel are killing is insignificant in relationship to what the people that the United States have killed in the massacres that the United States has done over the course of the years. But what's interesting now is, because of social media, because of alternative media, because of, everyone has a cell phone, everyone has an access to this information, people are seeing the reality of the brutal slaughter of civilians. People are seeing that on their cell phones, on their computers. They're actually in touch with it. You can't get away with these types of genocidal acts like you could in the past. And Americans, the reason American foreign policy works is because Americans don't know what the heck their government is doing. And if they did, they would be aghast to understand what their government is doing. Now we have an instance, because of modern technology, because of the internet, now we have an instance where the American people actually in real time get to see just a sliver of what their government has been doing all along. And it's extremely hard to stomach. I argue this. Let me make another argument about Israel. When people talk about the nation of Israel, I go back to two things. Alexander Haig said what? That Israel is the United States' unsinkable aircraft carrier. Joe Biden said, if Israel did not exist, the United States would have to create it to address our interest in the region. So what are both of them saying? They're not referring to Israel as a country. For instance, you could say, if we didn't have an aircraft carrier, we'd have to build one so we could project power, right? You're not saying it's a unique individual and independent ship. You're saying this is my ship and I'm going to use that to project power. The people who run America do not see Israel as a country. They see it as a military outpost in the oil-rich region of the Middle East. So when they're unsinkable aircraft carrier was threatened, what happens? The United States sends actual sinkable aircraft carriers, right? We send all these aircraft carriers, an armada of ships. We've sent generals. We have people fighting on the ground. Why does the United States go in there and they're fighting it and acting like it's the U.S. war? Because it is the U.S. war. Because Garland Nixon, in my belief, I don't see Israel as an independent nation. I see it like Alexander Haig saw it, and I see it like Joe Biden sees it, as a military outpost, an unsinkable aircraft carrier that if it didn't exist, we'd have to create it. So we're in there fighting, but the people can see what's going on. And now Americans are like, oh my God, you mean to tell me we're doing this? I'm upset. And the leadership, it's like, but Biden and those people are like, hey, I don't understand. We've been doing this all along. Why are you guys freaked out about this now? Because they didn't know. And now they know. And it's ripping the guts out of the Democratic Party. And it is destroying the U.S. empire's ability, credibility worldwide. I mean, let's think about this. Is the U.S. ever going to be able to say to someone, hey, your country is doing human rights violations? Oh, China, you're doing human rights violations against the Muslims in the Uyghurs in the region of Xinjiang. And that's done. That dog ain't hunting anymore. So it's
definitely
changing
creates
dynamics.
definitely creates a double standard. That's
yeah.
I'm exhausted. Last night I couldn't sleep, but when I did, I could hear bombs in my dreams. Nightmare situation. How could they be so evil, making martyrs out of children and innocent people? We expect the bombs, not knowing where next. Huddle in the corner of my room, trying to protect my little brother as the building shakes like it's possessed, but nothing stronger than the will of the oppressed. I bomb back with my lyrics and rhymes, living the times trying to break the Palestinian minds. What's hiding in the clouds hanging over my head? My dad risks his life outside to buy bread. The fourth war in my 12th year. At this stage I'm numb, though I haven't felt scared. There's nothing I can do in this case to stay safe. I'm brave, even though this house could be in my grave. I want freedom for the population. 2 million prisoners living in this location, shouting at the wall, but nothing is ever changing. That's life under an occupation. I want freedom for the population. 2 million prisoners living in this location, shouting at the wall, but nothing is ever changing. That's life under an occupation. Mothers mourn, fighting with grief. White sheets cover bodies that lie on the streets. Buildings turn to ash, but my mind is made of steel. So it doesn't take much for me to heal. Won't lose the will to live or lose our minds. My auntie lost her home, so she lost her life, but she is still alive, but traumatized by the bombs that flew in and dropped that night. My sister couldn't sleep, tried to stop her cries. I said it was fireworks, I was telling her lies. Where's the compassion? This is heartless. It's like they want us all living in darkness, cutting off water and electricity for hours. They're knocking towers, but that's not knocking the power that I have in my pen. When I'm writing, I'm unstoppable. The microphone is the only escape possible, cause that's the way that I can speak my mind. I wonder, how does the fighter pilot sleep at night, knowing he can turn the city upside down all of a sudden, slaughtering families with the push of a button. I want freedom for the population. 2 million prisoners living in this location, shouting at the wall, but nothing is ever changing. That's life under an occupation. I want freedom for the population. 2 million prisoners living in this location, shouting at the wall, but nothing is ever changing. That's life under an occupation.
That was MC Abdul with a track I have played on the show probably at least 4 or 5 times over the past month or so. And interestingly enough, whenever I play that track on the show, my YouTube channel bans gets blocked.
Of course.
And he's a 12-year-old kid, you know, just telling it like it is, like living under occupation. I mean, that's been going on for, well, God knows how long. Well, I guess the last big deal was like back in 2014 or something. But what'd you think of that track, Garland?
Oh man, that was outstanding. I just shared it on my Facebook. That was really good. I'm going to start playing that on my radio show on WPFW in Washington, D.C.
Awesome.
I'm going to start playing that track that's going to be my track.
Cool. Yeah, he's. I mean, I just pray that he's okay. I mean, God, imagine. But yeah, let's just talk about what's going on in Gaza. Let's talk about the reality of it. The reason the only thing I want to start off by saying is that someone said to me recently, they said, well, why are you so concerned about Israel's invasion or, the treatment of what's going on with the Gazans when you were so supportive of Russia when they invaded Ukraine? First of all, the thing I said was, that's kind of what you call a false equivalency.
Right.
Apples and oranges, as my math teacher used to say when we were trying to do math equations. You have to convert apples to apples or oranges to oranges before you can follow up. But the other thing is that, and this is according to a UN report that I just read, that the roughly 9,000 or so civilians that have died in Ukraine over the past almost 2 years, they were a result of Ukraine bombing cities like Donetsk, which is in the eastern part of Ukraine, which is now under control of the Russians. Whereas conservative estimate is that at least 10,000 Gazans have died in the last 3.5, almost 4 weeks due to indiscriminate bombing. So you can't even really make that equation.
Well, there is one area. You know what that is? There is one area. Prior to Russia engaging with Ukraine, let's not pretend that war wasn't going on. There was a war going on there ever since 2014 to 2015. So let's start here. 16,000 people in eastern Ukraine died as a result of shelling and bombing from the Ukrainian military. Russia stepped in and said, we're going to stop that. So I would argue, hey, look, civilians were being killed by the Ukrainian military and Russia stepped in as a result of that. They stopped it. So here's what I have to say. The Russians stepped in to stop their people from being slaughtered by the Ukrainians. And I think that, they stepped into what is effectively a Ukrainian civil war. Ukrainians were killing other Ukrainians and Russians stepped in. And now, and I said at the time, they need to stop. If they hadn't been killing Ukrainians in the eastern region, Russia wouldn't have stepped in. So now, in this instance, I think the world needs to step in diplomatically, of course, and stop the killing of civilians in Gaza. So I think there is an area. So, I mean, only if you start the conflict in Russia in February of 2022, there's one view of it. But if you are honest about it and start it in 2014, 2015, when the war actually started, then there are some similarities. Civilians were being killed by the eastern Ukrainians. The people that the United States supported and armed were regularly killing Ukrainians in the same way that the people that the United States supports and arms are now killing the people of Gaza.
God, it's just so. Did you listen to or watch any of what's his name? The leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon. He made a speech just it was the day before yesterday.
I'm familiar with it.
What do you think the dangers are of this turning into a wider conflict? I mean, do you think that some aspect of this is an effort to ultimately spark a conflict with Iran?
I think a couple of things. I think the U.S. knows it wouldn't be a good idea to go to war with Iran. I think there are some unstable, outlandish elements in the U.S. empire. There are neocons that want war with Iran, but I think that there are also a lot of cooler heads that understand that it won't be a good thing for the United States if that happens. I think that I don't think Biden personally wants it, but I do think there are people it's certainly the Israeli leadership wants war with Iran. They know they can't go to war with Iran. So they want the United States to go to war with Iran. I think luckily there are some cool heads in the Middle East. I don't know how long, and I'll put it this way. I do not know how much longer the leaders of the countries in the Middle East will be able to restrain their populations, because their populations are ready to, explode and, fight Israel. I think, fortunately for us, the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, I always screw it up pronouncing his name, but at any rate, the leader of Hezbollah wisely chose to not fully enter the war. Let's be honest. Hezbollah is attacking Israeli positions. They are involved in fighting right now. Hezbollah and Europe and Israel are fighting, but Hezbollah has not opened up with their full arsenal. If they did, here's the reality: they've got a lot of missiles in range that they could usually. If Hezbollah was to put 1,000 missiles, which they could do, on every Israeli military base, that would be it. You know what I mean? Now, could the U.S. retaliate, et cetera, with their shit? Yes, but it would be a very bad situation for Israel if Hezbollah was to decide we're going to let them have it with everything we have. But I think Hezbollah wisely also realizes, look, if this thing spreads throughout the region, could possibly go nuclear, because an unstable country like Israel with nuclear weapons is just as liable to use nuclear weapons as anything else. So I think Hezbollah is holding their powder a bit, and they understand this too. What the U.S. can't really handle here, and what Israel can't handle, is long term. They can't do it. Israel, I think their goose is cooked, but they especially can't handle long term, because think about this. Two things. Number one, a lot of Israelis have dual citizenship, right? And you've got citizenship in the United States and Israel, and you're living in Israel, right? And the Israelis say, "Hey, Jewish people, all come here. This is where you're going to be safe. There's anti-Semitism, other places. All come here where you can share your culture and be safe." And there's a war going on nonstop. You ain't going there. You're coming back to where it's safe. So the people who have dual citizenship are all leaving. In the north, where Hezbollah lives, where Hezbollah is on the southern Lebanon, northern Israel, there's fighting going on. That's pretty much empty. Those people from northern Israel are saying, we ain't going back. The people in the kibbutzes are saying, yeah, we're not safe. We can't go back there. We're afraid we'll get. So Israel, if the war stopped tomorrow, the people who were living in the vulnerable areas of Israel ain't going back, because they don't have confidence that the Israeli government can protect them. So if the Israeli government, which it has no inclination to do, does not have some kind of a peace, some kind of treaty with its neighbors, people are not coming back. Israel's going to collapse. I mean, one of the major ways that Israel makes money is through tourism. Ain't nobody coming there for tourism. Those Holy Land tours are a thing of the past. So looking forward, go ahead.
I just traveled across country, and there, leaving Newark Airport, there was 3 Israeli Airlines planes just parked. I mean, they weren't going anywhere.
No, ain't nobody going to Israel. Not happening. People aren't going into a war zone. And how does Israel get out of this? How do they get out of it? Do people really think that if they don't, find a way, if the international community doesn't step in and really fix this thing, that the Arab neighbors, that the people around are going to just say, okay, it's all over. Let's go back to normal. Israel is not going to be able to live a normal existence unless the international community comes in and finds a way to resolve this issue.
We just have to do, Nick's just going to run the station ID. It's about 18 seconds. Go ahead, Nick.
The The opinions expressed on this program are those of the speaker or guest and do not necessarily reflect those of the management or staff of Radio Kingston WKNY, AM 1490, FM 1079, Kingston, New York.
Yeah, Hassan Nasrallah, by the way, Garland is the name of the leader of Hezbollah. He's a cleric, priest. And on, again, in terms of regional power, we also have Turkey with Erdogan, who I think it was just last week I watched a beautiful talk by he used to be known as Cat Stevens. Now he's Yusuf Islam. I mean, I don't know how many people were in that crowd, but that, obviously Erdogan is taking full political advantage of this situation as well. And I don't necessarily think he's an altruistic individual. I don't look at him as a nice guy on any level whatsoever. On a humanitarian level, this is just, what we're seeing is, and again, I have to emphasize this. I have to say this over and over and over again, because I've listened to Orthodox rabbis say that this is creating a situation where, anti-Semitism is already on the rise. This is just going to put it through the roof. So some of these Orthodox rabbis, which are followers of Rabbi Teitelbaum, who was a rabbi back in the 50s and 60s, he said, and I don't know if you read Chris Hedges' most recent report, but he's basically equating, he's calling the government of Israel a fascist government. By anyone's definition,
Yeah, it's pretty clear, I think. And one of the issues you have, and I think it's one of the good things that's happening now, if you can take anything good, is that people are taking time to learn about the issue of Zionism and the history of Zionism, and as opposed to Judaism. Because one of the things that happened is that over the course of time, there has been an attempt to conflate the two terms, Zionism versus Judaism. And Judaism, talk about what exactly it is. I'm not Jewish, so I don't want to, be the one to try to say I can define Judaism. But
I can tell you something for sure that I know is that Judaism is a peaceful religion.
Yes, Zionism is not it's a political, and culture. It's not religious. Joe Biden says, I am a Zionist. Joe Biden ain't got no yarmulkes. That guy's not Jewish. He's Irish Catholic, right? So Zionism is political. And so, people are starting to understand that, I need to know what Zionism is, and I need to understand it. And I need to understand that I can oppose Zionism and I'm not opposing Judaism, or I'm not anti-Semitic. I can say that is a political ideology that I find distasteful. And that's what we're saying. People are saying it's a political ideology that I find distasteful. And it has, in fact, Zionism in the current form it is in the state of Israel. Again, the military outpost of Israel has moved to a fascist nature, a very violent, expansionist, fascist nature. And people are understanding. I was at the march yesterday in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen anything like it. The biggest anti-war march that I've ever been to was in 2003. I believe it was February.
I was there.
It was a high of 16 degrees that day. But I remember. Yep. And there was, couple 100,000 men. It was pretty big. I was, shocked by the size of it. And I thought that was the biggest I would ever see. It wasn't. Yesterday was unbelievable. And I tell you something that I've been saying, that I really believe it's necessary. And that was what they had, like a week or a week and a half. They planned it and put 300,000 minimum people on the streets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I believe that the people who've been planning these things need to start planning for Chicago, August 19th through the 22nd. For the Democratic Convention. I believe that if they start planning now, they can put 1 million people in Chicago. That's what needs to happen, in my opinion. They need to make 1968 look like it was a walk in the park. and
Right.
put 1 million people in it and make it clear once and for all, we will not accept the abuse and the murder and the mistreatment of the people in apartheid, and your party will fall to the ground. It will not get the support of the people. That's what I believe should happen, and
Which
I'm
would
hoping
be-
it happens.
Well, if they don't get the message, the tragedy of that is look what the alternative is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got Donald Trump saying that anybody who protests is a jihadist and should be
Sure.
deported. And I'm like,
Which just goes to show something else. So here's what that means. You're going to get it either way. So either you're going to get some guy who goes along with whatever the Zionists want and he gives you bad tweets, or you're going to give some guy who goes along with whatever the Zionist wants and he doesn't give you bad tweets. He just censors everybody else's tweets. But either way, you're going to get it. At some point, you have to say, to me, you have to stop saying, okay, well, we're not going to do this because Trump's over there. I've had enough of that. I'm not, at some point I have to say, I'm not supporting it. This is the way I would look at it for the Democratic Party. If you think that Trump is so bad, you tell me you think Trump is horrible, he's unthinkable, then you need to do what your party wants to stop him. If your only option is either Trump and you lose, or you change your policies, then you're not afraid of Trump. If you were that much afraid of Trump, you'd change your policies so that you could get our votes and beat him. I'm supposed to be afraid of Trump, but you're not.
yeah, I think many people are starting to see through that charade. I mean, my impression from what I've been reading more recently is that, I think that Biden and his administration would like to see the back end of Netanyahu at this point. I think he's just bad. There's an election coming. I mean, we're in the election cycle for 2024, no doubt about it. And this is bad for everybody. So, it kind of feels like, they would like to try and downgrade this thing to a tropical storm instead of a hurricane at this point, but I could be wrong.
Well, here's an article right here. Since we're talking about this, Trump thumps Biden in swing states. New poll shows. New York Times Siena poll. Trump wins Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada. I talk to a cousin of mine, and he grew up black. He grew up on the streets of Baltimore City. Baltimore City guy. He ended up getting a master's degree, did quite well for himself. But I mean, he knows the streets. He knows what time it is on the streets of Baltimore. He grew up. He knows the culture. He's blah, blah, blah. I still have a lot of relatives in Baltimore, in the city, in the inner city, et cetera. Right. And he was a guy who was like, yeah, we got to vote for Biden. Because Trump, right? I don't try to lead the witness. I was talking to him the other day, and me, I hate, but I'm an independent. I hate them both. I'm not voting for either of them. But at any rate, so I'm talking to him last week, about 2 weeks ago. And I said, what do you think? And he's railing about how terrible Biden is. And I said, let me ask you a question. I said, if you had to make a choice, somebody put a gun to your head, because he had already told me, next November. I said, what are you going to do when it comes to time to vote? He says, I'm going to rake leaves. I'm raking leaves. That's what I'm going to do. It's November. I'll rake leaves that day. And I said, let me ask you a question then. If somebody put a gun to your head, and this is a black man who's in his 50s, who was doesn't even have to vote straight Democrat, right? I said, if somebody put a gun to your head and said, you have got to choose Biden or Trump, what would you do? He said, that ain't even a question. I'm like, what do you mean? He says, I vote for Trump. He says, it's not even a question. Don't even ask me that. If I had to vote for one or two, there's no question I'd vote for Trump. And I'm like, okay, interesting. I just left it at that.
Right. What does that say about the state of, what is something's rotten in the state of Denmark? I think that's from Hamlet, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what, you know what that is? That's what this lesser of evil has gotten us to. This is what the lesser of two evils. Well, we got to vote for Biden because Trump will win. Oh, we got to vote for this person because the Democrat will win. Oh, we got to vote for Clinton because Dole will win. And then the Democrats were just like, yeah, we'll do whatever we want because where else are they going to go? And at some point, you would get to the point where they would say, we ain't going to go nowhere else. We're going to rake leaves, and they're going to lose the youth vote. Forget it. Done. Pennsylvania, the guy, look what happened with the trains in Ohio, Pennsylvania area. He did nothing in East Palestine. And so you knew that was done. Ohio, he may not be winning. Trump will Ronald Reagan this guy and win 48 states at the rate that we're going. There is going to be absolute mayhem in the Democratic Party within the next month. There's going to be resignations. Listen to this. A friend of mine yesterday, I talked to a friend of mine, and he said when he was walking up to the, now this is interesting. Breaking news here. I'm going to give you some breaking news, and I'll have the pictures. He was at the in the march yesterday, the rally, and he said, when I was walking up, I saw a bunch of people. I started talking to them. They were congressional staffers. He said, "Yeah, wow. I took pictures of them. I'll send you the pictures, Malcolm. I will send you the pictures." He said they were no shame in their game. Congressional staffers. Yesterday, wow. This thing's a mess, and it's going to tear the guts out of the Democratic Party, and it should tear the guts out of this monster.
Well, what a way to have what a tragic way to have that kind of change occur, because it's, I know that the death toll from what's going on in Gaza is going to be a lot more than 10,000. I mean, when the numbers add up, we could be looking at 30 or 40,000. And who knows who's counting, right? Who's counting how many people are underneath the rubble? I mean, they're bombing hospitals. They bombed what's the main road that goes from the north of Gaza to the south? I forget the name of the road, but they, Israel said, well, you got to leave the north. We'll leave this road. This is the only way to go south. And then they bombed the people leaving down the road. I mean, this is just it's an outright massacre. It's a genocide. So
I'm looking at the picture right now. He sent me a picture, and the guys have masks over their face, and it says, "Biden in Congress, your staff demands a ceasefire." And they're people, these congressional staffers. He sent me a video too. I haven't had a chance to watch the video, but maybe an interview of them or whatever. But yes, so there were congressional staffers, which doesn't shock me.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, I'd like to play another track if you don't mind.
Certainly.
This track is called "Touchdown Palestine" by Wahib Nassan and Jadine.
Yeah. Y'all ready? Yeah. Palestine. Touchdown Palestine. Y'all ready? Palestine. Touchdown. Come on, boy, Wahib. Hey, touchdown, let's go, hey. Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit him, I connect, then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, hey. Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit him, I connect, then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, hey. Kiara B, they know I'm about it. Inspiring my people by the thousands. Red, white, black, green, all over my outfit. Reppin' Palestine, more than DJ Khaled. I can never live to see him suffer. Shout us to Wahib, linking up my brothers. They cannot oppress us, we know that God's above them. Feeding on my people, all the children, man, we gonna. Music for humanity, we kill it with a message. Do it for the family, I'm still forever reppin'. Nataj al-Hariya fi bilad al-Arabiya. Got the gang all with me and we rockin' that kafiyah on. Then we do the depth kick, let the drums bang. Then we hit up Al-Quds on a Friday. Black boy in Philistine, that's a blessed thing. I'ma bring the east side to the west bank. Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit him, I connect, then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, ayy. Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit him, I connect, then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, ayy.
My people dying and the media is blocking us from seeing it and hearing it because they're bombarding us. Think about the refugees, that's what the departure does. We are targets and you are disregarding us. See, regardless of the pain, I'ma start it up. Me and J. Dean gon' start it up. I got all my Palestinians guarding us, and we only speak the truth, so pardon us. Got the kufiya on my headband, gotta represent, man. Hit up Times Square and we just dance. Hit the depth for the culture like I'm supposed to. Rep it red, white, black, green till the death, man. تعال معي يلا رايحين على رام الله. Trying to go to Palestine, you know who to call up. Chi-Town, NY to the north side. If you ain't rocking with us, you on the wrong side.
Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit on my connect. Then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, yeah. Start the day feeling blessed, so I hit on my connect. Then I go and cut the check, book the jet, then it's touchdown, Palestine. Summertime, bring the gang down, Palestine. Summertime, yeah.
Y'all ain't ready for this one.
Yeah. Summertime, yeah.
Summertime.
Touchdown, Palestine.
Hey, hey, hey.
Touchdown, Palestine. Got the game.
Chi-Town,
Touchdown, Palestine.
north side,
Yeah.
NY. Touchdown, Palestine.
We're on with one of my all-time favorite guests, Garland Nixon. Garland, thanks so much for... Sorry, I thought I had myself muted.
Oh, no.
Could you hear me?
Yes,
Anyway,
loud and
Garland.
clear.
Oh, good. I pressed the wrong bloody button. I know you have to go fairly soon. So what'd you think of that track?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, great. The stuff that you're putting out here is fantastic.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, it's there's some great music out there. I mean, but given that we've just got a few minutes left to talk, I guess what I'd like to pick your brain about is looking 6 months or so down the road. Where do you think things are going to be? I mean, I know we're talking about, the Democratic Party having potentially some kind of revolution.
Well, a couple of things. I think we are in danger of, certainly, right now, if you had to bet, I think it's better than 50-50 that, and now people say that, people discuss the issue of a regional war in the Middle East, right? And which I think that's the wrong term, because a regional war implies that there'd be countries fighting against each other. No, it wouldn't be a regional war. It would be a civilizational war, wherein the Muslim countries would be saying the United States and Israel, we're at war, and not just Muslim countries. Muslims around the world as a religion, as a civilization. I think it's better than 50-50 that happens. If that happens, all bets are off. I'm hoping that it doesn't, but it's probably better than 50-50 that something like that happens. You may not know, the Algerian parliament voted unanimously to militarily support Ukraine. There's a report right here. The Algerian parliament unanimously voted to authorize President Abdelmajid Tebboune to enter the Gaza war and militarily support Palestine. The 100-100 vote came on November 2nd. So the bottom line is this. That's Yemen. That's Algeria. Those are countries that aren't major countries, but at some point here, if this keeps going in the direction it is, there will be a disruption in the flow of oil, which means that's it for the U.S. That's it, which means when it comes to economic crashes, right now we're probably looking at a better than 50% chance that happens. I mean, if you think about this, the derivatives market, derivatives, if you probably know, are nothing but insurance. I say I'm going to invest in futures, oil futures in this instance, right? And I say I'm going to buy insurance in case my oil futures goes bad and the investments don't work out. This insurance company will cover me. That's derivatives. But if all of them go bad, then no insurance. That would be like an insurance company who has life insurance and every single person that they insured died at the same time. They couldn't pay it. If, in fact, there is a disruption in the flow of oil out of the Middle East, though the derivatives market, which is tens of trillions of dollars, would collapse because these companies couldn't pay off all the people that would lose their oil investments. And guess what happens then? 2008 looks like a nice Saturday afternoon. So there is a potential better than 50-50 that happens. Let's hope that doesn't. Let's hope wiser, cooler heads prevail, but there's no guarantee. Certainly, within the next 6 months, I believe that the Ukraine situation resolves itself in a complete collapse militarily and economically in Ukraine. That is a debacle, the mother of all debacles for the U.S. government, the Biden administration right there. And of course, Israel can't go on doing this forever if they do this much longer. Let's face it, Israel doesn't have an economy. They don't have many people, which means the United States will then be paying all the bills, every single bill, paying everything, completely supporting Israel, and the same for Ukraine. Can the U.S. do that? Yeah. No, we got two 51st and 52nd state that we're completely, we're looking at a very big mess for the Biden administration. Best case scenario, we will hope for all of us and pray that this thing doesn't metastasize into a civilizational war, at which point, and I'll say this, even if it doesn't, at some point, the pressure will be so great on the Arab leaders that they'll have to shut off the oil spigots to the U.S., that they'll have to say, we're shutting off your oil if you don't stop. I think we're weeks away from that.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, not to mention the fact that so many Americans are kind of finally getting wise to this idea, and they're saying, well, why are we paying all this money for, well, in terms of Ukraine, I mean, most people have barely given a second thought until 18 months ago. I mean, most Americans probably can barely, if you said point to Kiev on a map, they wouldn't know where it was,
Well, but let me ask you this. How long do you think, based on the fact that the younger people in the Democratic Party are furious and are on the verge of some kind of a pushback, they're on the verge of some kind of mutiny, how long do you think the Democratic Party can continue supporting the Netanyahu government before the Democratic Party virtually collapses?
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't think they got a long time. I just sent Liz some pictures that I had that were sent to me. My friend actually did send me the pictures, and they were staffers, Democratic staffers. One of them says, Biden in Congress, your staff demands a ceasefire. The other one says, Congress, your staff demands a ceasefire. So now, they're there. The next move is going to be they're walking out the door.
As they say.
Yeah. It's something that needs to happen.
Garland, we have a friendly face on here named Scott Ritter. He just jumped on. You want to say hi?
Scott Ritter. Hey, how's it going, buddy? I missed you yesterday at the DC march, but I'd never seen anything like that in my life. It was unbelievable. And I was just telling Malcolm that a friend of mine, when he first got there, ran into a bunch of congressional staffers who were holding banners saying, Congress, your staff demands a ceasefire. I think the Democratic Party is looking at some kind of an internal uprising here coming up sometime soon.
I think America's looking at a internal uprising. I think the paradigm has been broken here of the dominance of the Israeli lobby. There are a number of, mythologies. The bubbles are being burst, and things that you weren't allowed to talk about before, like Palestinian statehood, without being mocked, without being, derided as sympathetic of terrorism. That day is over, and I think that we're taking a look at a brave new world, and for politicians, this is the scariest possible time because they look. It's. I'm not making this up. I think the problem is half the stuff we're saying right now. If you say it, you're called anti-Semitic, which is of course a mechanism, a tactic designed to silence any vocal opposition to Israel or the Israeli lobby. But the Israeli lobby has bought and paid the U.S. Congress to perform in Pavlovian response to the to the desires of the Israeli government. And for a politician whose career has been paid for by the Israeli shekel. And I'm not being anti-Semitic. Benjamin Netanyahu openly brags about this. The people out there who call me anti-Semitic for saying this, you simply choose to ignore it because you know it's the truth and it's an uncomfortable truth. I think that these politicians are for the first time going to be confronted with the fact that being pro-Israeli might be more detrimental to their political aspirations than being anti-Arab.
Well, I'm glad that you said that, Scott, because it's one of these situations where for years and years and years we've seen what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank with the Palestinians, but we have not been able to really say anything because there's this sense that if you criticize Israel, you're being anti-Semitic. But I think it's becoming very, very obvious that I had a guest, I won't name names, at the beginning of the year, and they had just gotten back. They're actually born and raised in Israel, and they came back and they said, I want people to know about these huge demonstrations that have been happening in Tel Aviv against the government. And that's something, I mentioned it to people and they're like, well, I didn't even hear about that. It wasn't even in the news, and I think people need to also be very aware of the fact that, it's like blaming all Americans for, Donald Trump or Joe Biden or something. We're a third of the population ends up voting for a government that takes over. So, I don't know where to go from there, but.
Yeah, well, I would say this, I think that one of the things we're going to see, I'm with Scott, after what I saw, yesterday, at that march, I think this issue is going to destabilize this country. It's certainly, especially going to destabilize the Democratic Party. I think we're going to start seeing some more resignations. I think it's going to so destabilize the Democratic Party in the year before the election that I don't know if Joe Biden, how long he's even, I don't know if he was going to be around anyway, but you're going to see big things happening politically here because people are furious. They understand what's going on. And there is not just distaste for this. I see in the streets absolute rage and fury, and particularly amongst the younger population.
Yeah, and the bad news for politicians of all stripes who have sold out to Israel. And Malcolm, let me just say it's not a great act of courage for me to do this. Let me, what I think separates me from a lot of people is that I used to have both feet firmly in the pro-Israeli camp. Back in 1994 to 1998, I worked very closely with Israeli intelligence, with the Israeli government, with the Israeli Defense Force. And when I say very close, I mean closer than most people can possibly imagine. No, I wasn't an agent of Israel, but we were working in a very cooperative fashion about unraveling the complexities of the Iraqi weapons of mass destruction programs in an effort to implement Security Council resolutions. Also during the Gulf War, when many of these rich American Jewish people who, flock to Tel Aviv to plant their trees in Jerusalem to feel at one with the Holy Land were fleeing Israel because of Iraqi missiles that were impacting there. I was one of a handful of people that were putting their lives on the line to stop these missiles from hitting Israel. So I've addressed the American Jewish Congress. I had them call me anti-Semitic, and I stared them right in the face and told them that I am more pro-Israel than they will ever be because, unlike them, I don't run. I stood. I was there. I have sweat equity. I have blood equity. None of them do. They have all run. None of them are willing to die for this cause. I was willing to die for the security of Israel. So for me, with my history, to come out today and say what I'm saying, you can't touch me. The Israelis can't touch me. The American Jewish community can't touch me, because they can't say that I'm anti-Semitic. They can't say that I'm anti-Israel, that I was, inclined to this. No. Israel lost me because of what it has done. Israel lost me because it had drifted away from the Israel that I fell in love with, the Israel of Yitzhak Rabin, the Israel of a nation that, despite all of the difficulties of its history, all the difficulties of its relationship with the Arab world, was making an effort, an honest effort to turn the corner. Was it a perfect effort? No. There are people out there who will be able to cut, holes in the Oslo Accords and criticize this, I'm taking again to Teddy Roosevelt's famous speech, "The Man in the Arena." And for all those people that sit there and throw stones at the Oslo Accords, you weren't in the arena. You didn't have the guts to stand there. You sit back and you criticize. Yitzhak Rabin put it all on the line. Put it all on the line for peace between Israel and Palestine. And he paid the ultimate price. He was assassinated, not by a Palestinian, not by Hamas, but by an Israeli Jew, a right-wing Jew who gunned him down, thinking that he had been told to do so by Benjamin Netanyahu, of all people, the man who's
didn't Netanyahu back in 1996 or 7 when he was running against Rabin? What year was Rabin killed?
Killed 1995.
Right. Well, I understand that during that campaign, he actually, during one of his campaign fundraiser, he actually dressed up Rabin in a Nazi outfit.
Yes, and he stood there silently while people were calling Rabin a Nazi and ordering him killed. And he also failed to contradict instructions given by his radical right-wing rabbis who invoked Talmudic scripture, not the Torah, not the holy book, but Talmudic scripture that basically marked Yitzhak Rabin for death as a betrayer of the Jews. And Netanyahu knew they gave those orders and did nothing to countermand them. And the man who shot Rabin said, "I thought my rabbi ordered me to do it in the name of Judaism."
Well, what's the now that because I know you guys talk about this quite a bit. I watched your last Warrior Update. I mean, from a strategic point of view, what are the implications for the Middle East? What are the implications for the United States? And what are the implications for Israel?
Well, and I'll start by saying I got to run, so I certainly appreciate it. I'll let Scott, I'll leave it up to the brilliance of Scott Ritter. But thanks a lot, Malcolm. I certainly appreciate you giving me an opportunity to speak on your show.
No, thank you, Garland. I know you have to go, and I really appreciate your time. And take care, brother. And we'll see you the next time.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Peace.
All right, Garland. See you.
All right, talk to you later, Scott.
That was Garland Nixon, of course. What a guy.
What a guy.
Anyway, Scott, thanks for such short notice. Thanks for jumping on here.
Got my blood pressure up on a Sunday night.
Well, yeah. No, but I mean, the question I just asked, I mean, I know this is your field of expertise. What are the implications in terms of where this could potentially go from
on October 6th, we were facing a situation where the Abrams Accord, which was, the agreement that was brokered by the Trump administration with Israel and the Gulf Arab states for the normalization of relations. It included this notion of a pathway to a Palestinian state, but everybody who read it said there is no pathway here. There will never be a Palestinian state, which was the whole idea of the Abrams Accord. It basically was an effort by the Trump administration to make Israel even more relevant to the Middle East as a whole, economically, politically, militarily, to turn Israel into not a nation that created geopolitical division in the Middle East, but Israel become the steel to the Gulf Arab spine, creating a adequate counter to the Shia crescent, the axis of resistance that had been structured, cobbled together by Iran with Hezbollah in Lebanon, Bashar al-Assad in Syria, the pro-Syrian militias in both, or the pro-Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq. Of course, Iran is the major player here, the Houthi in Yemen. The axis of resistance had taken over a domineering role, was largely responsible for the rollback of American military power in the Middle East. And the idea was, with the Abrams Accord, to get Israel to buy in with the Gulf Arabs and stand up to this axis of resistance. And it was happening. I mean, Israel had normalized relations. Israel had a military presence in the Red Sea, in the Persian Gulf. Israel opened up diplomatic relations with several Gulf Arab states, and the crown jewel in this effort would have been the normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia, especially after China had that fantastic diplomatic coup where they got Saudi Arabia and Iran to reconcile their own relations. This was problematic for the United States because it put Saudi Arabia on a path of peaceful coexistence with Iran, which is the last thing we wanted. We needed Saudi Arabia to have friction with Iran to help isolate Iran and contain Iran. And so by getting Israel and Saudi Arabia to talk about normalization of relations, that could that could put a fly in the ointment, so to speak, of this notion of Iranian-Saudi peace process. So that was happening. Nobody was talking about a Palestinian state. Everybody was talking about normalization. Benjamin Netanyahu, who used to go to the General Assembly debate in New York in September and hold up cartoon diagrams of bombs and show the world how dangerous the Iranian bomb was. This time he held up a map of the Middle East and talked about this economic corridor that stretched from Mumbai through the Gulf Arab states, up through Saudi Arabia, crossing into Jordan, then into Israel to Haifa, and extending on to Greece, and saying that Israel was going to play an important role in this. And this was also Joe Biden's centerpiece briefing of this Middle East economic corridor, the India, Middle East economic corridor. He briefed it at the G20, bragged about it. This was it. This was what was going to, make America and Israel and everybody relevant again. This is all we were talking about. Then October 7th came, and we aren't talking about any of that anymore. The Abrams Accord is dead, finished, done. Because the Abrams Accord was about putting the final nail in the coffin of Palestinian statehood. Now it's evident that whatever the resolution to this problem looks like, it's going to be inclusive of not just talk about a Palestinian state, but the actual manifestation of a Palestinian state. Mm-hmm. So that's a huge, huge shift in in how the world views the Middle East. Israel on October 6th, if you did a poll of people and what they thought about the Israeli Defense Force would have rated as one of the most powerful militaries in the world, definitely in terms of, man-to-man reputation as, an unparalleled fighting force. Israeli intelligence was just legendary. The second you say that, you envision, secret agents everywhere gathering all the intelligence and these very clever people able to manipulate this data to achieve supremacy and victory. And Israel, of course, the land of high technology, things of that nature. That's all gone. The Israeli Defense Force was shown to be one of the most incompetent militaries in the world. I mean, they were humiliated by Hamas on October 7th, humiliated. Stand-up fights between the 13th and 51st Battalions of the Golani Brigade, one of the elite infantry units of the Israeli Defense Force. Stand-up fights, Hamas beat them, whipped them, slapped them around, slaughtered them. Hamas broke through this vaunted, wall that Israel had built to cage 2 million Palestinians into this open-air concentration camp. Hamas broke through it, penetrated the defensive barrier that includes not just military bases, but militarized kibbutzes or settlements, and inflicted a humiliation not only on the Israeli Defense Force, but Israeli intelligence, which failed to detect this, which failed to predict this, which was taken totally by surprise. They humiliated the Israeli government. Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who since the 1990s had been selling himself as Mr. Security, the man that can guarantee the security of Israel, is now the prime minister who presided over Israel's greatest defeat. All of the Israeli generals, every single one of them, this right-wing cabinet, politicians, they've all been disgraced. They're teetering on the brink of irrelevancy. I don't think Benjamin Netanyahu survives this, politically survives this crisis. He will have to go. So too will his generals. Every general out there, every minister of defense who's saying all these tough things about how they're going to do this, that, and the other thing in Gaza. Remember, they were the ones in charge on October 7th. They were horrible then. They're horrible now. They don't know what they're doing. The Israelis are being humiliated on the ground in Gaza as we speak. Israel has set an impossible bar, the total defeat of Hamas, both ideologically, politically, militarily. And anything less than what they have set out for will be, by definition, a failure. Israel is doomed to fail on this. If Israel had played their cards right on October 8th, instead of lashing out with this collective punishment of the Palestinian people, if Israel has instead just resecured the border and then worked with the international community as they are supposed to do, citing Article 51 in the United Nations for self-defense, turning the United Nations for assistance, there would be demonstrations, millions of people in the streets of the cities around the world demonstrating on behalf of Israel, protesting what happened. Instead, Israel has allowed the script to be flipped by the mass murder of Palestinian children and women and men, innocent civilians, and it's the pro-Palestinian people that are in the street. So this is a it's a total sea change in terms of how the world views Israel. And I think it's the end of political Zionism as it has existed for over 70 years.
Well, what a terrible price to have to pay for that change, though.
Well, Malcolm, I agree. I mean, of course I agree. I'm a father of I wouldn't, come on, they're killing children. They're killing children. But what future did they have, Malcolm? What future did they have? No Palestinian statehood, perpetual imprisonment in this open-air concentration camp, to be forever under the thumb of Israel. The sacrifice that these people are making. Look, and I don't mean to be too harsh here, but when Charles de Gaulle was approached by Eisenhower and the planners of the Normandy campaign, they said, if for us to take Normandy, we're going to have to do things that are going to kill French civilians. And de Gaulle said, how many will die? And they said tens of thousands. And he said, that's the price we must pay for liberty. That's the price we must pay for freedom. 60,000 French civilians were killed during the Normandy campaign, 60,000 by the Allies. The pathway to liberation is, especially under the conditions that the Palestinians face today, it's not something that could be won cheaply. There will be a heavy price to pay. And every Palestinian that's dying today at the hands of the Israeli genocide is a Palestinian who has sacrificed their lives in the cause of Palestinian statehood. They should be forever enshrined as heroes of Palestine because of their deaths, because of their sacrifice, the Israeli boot is going to finally be lifted off of Palestine, but it couldn't have happened without their sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Do you, in your estimation, do you think a one-state solution is the only solution at this point?
I'm not an expert on that. I as I said, I was firmly in the Israel camp. And so I was sympathetic in a superficial way to the Israeli, arguments. I always was a believer in the two-state solution because that was Yitzhak Rabin's solution. That was what Oslo was promoting. I do a podcast, and I had Eva Bartlett on. She's
yeah, I know Eva.
She's a very, very, very just a tremendous person, very courageous reporter.
Absolutely,
a lot of time in Gaza, and she said, Scott, that it's not viable. That only a one-state solution is viable. That Israel can never be trusted to, with the two-state formula. I'm reading up on it, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be an expert on something that I'm not. And I'm not the person to ask about, whether a one-state solution or a two-state solution is the way to go. To be honest, that's a political problem, and this is ultimately going to be a political solution. I don't believe in the eradication of Israel. I don't believe Israel should be wiped off the face of the earth. I do believe that the 1967 borders are a realistic starting point, maybe even going back to, in some instances, to 1948 borders to connect Gaza with the West Bank. Something has to be done, to give the Palestinians a homeland where they are equal to the Israelis. If that's a two-state formula, if it's a one-state formula, that's for politicians to decide. What held me back on a one-state formula was I never saw the Israeli government, this Zionist entity, especially the right-wing aspects of this, agreeing to this because of their whole greater Israel, Israel for Jews, the whole biblical thing. But they're being defeated as we speak, and we don't know what the how badly they're going to be defeated. If political Zionism collapses, as I hope it does, then a one-state solution is the answer. Right. But if the Israelis, through political compromise, and look, there will be political compromise. People need to understand that.
Well, there always, inevitably, there always is. I mean, there will be in Ukraine as well.
Well, Ukraine, we'll see. I'm with Russia. I think the political compromise only happens when you actually create a political process, and Russia will not deal with Zelensky, so they'll do that. But here's the thing. Would Hamas deal with Netanyahu? Probably not. But I don't think Netanyahu survives this. I think Netanyahu is on his way out. I think when the scope and scale of his failure becomes common knowledge, this was a man who was already teetering on the brink. As Garland alluded to, hundreds of thousands of Israelis were in the street protesting his rewriting of basic law that ended the notion of three separate but equal branches of government and subordinated the judiciary to a legislature that was held hostage to a political party loyal to Benjamin Netanyahu, and any judge that dared follow through on the prosecution and holding a trial to hold Benjamin Netanyahu accountable for the serious allegations of corruption, that judge would be impeached. That's not how democracies work. So all you people out there talking about the great democracy that is Israel, it is not. It's a dictatorship run by Benjamin Netanyahu, who is a veritable dictator. But this dictator has gone too far. Mr. Security wasn't. If he goes, and it's not just him, everybody around him is tainted. Benny Gantz is tainted. He's the opposition leader. There will have to be a new breed of Israeli politician that emerges from this, people who understand that the old paradigm is no longer in play. There's a new paradigm being developed, and that new paradigm will require them not just to sit down and talk with the Palestinian Authority, but Hamas as well.
Right.
And there, that now we have the foundation of what could become a political compromise. But as you said, once politicians get involved, people like me have to take a step back, because I'm a logic thinking kind of guy, and oftentimes political compromises, they're political, they're not logical.
Right. Well, Scott, I really appreciate you jumping on the show at such last minute, and I'd like to get you back on for a full 2 hours, but we're going to run out of time pretty soon, and I'd like to play one more track from our playlist before we wrap it up. So thanks for sharing your views, And we're going to go out with a track. Nick's got it queued up here by a beautiful Palestinian singer named Rimbana. The track is called The Night Has Fallen Down. So for all of you in the audience listening, thank you for joining us on the show. Thank you very much to Nick Pankin for holding the fort back there in Kingston. And Scott, it was great to see you.
Good.
And I'll talk to you. I'm actually out on the West Coast. I've been having a little bit of a family situation, so I'm dealing with that at the moment. So thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
And talk to you soon. And go ahead, play that track, Nick, and I'll say goodnight.
واتقفلت الابواب صار الغريب يلتجي من باب لباب امسى المسايا غريب واتفتحت الجراح يا عين لا تدمعي علي جفاني وراح سافر وخدني معاك بفطر على دقاك بصبر على الجوع ما بصبر على الفرقان سافر وخدني معاك بفطر على دقاك بصبر على الجوع ما بصبر على الفرقان والصبر أخدته معي خبيته بعيوني عفراق أهلي يا يما بالله لا تلوموني والصبر أخدته معي خبيته بعيوني عفراق أهلي يا يما بالله لا تلوموني يا كاتب الورقة واكتب حواشيها سلم على البلد يلا أحبابنا فيها يا كاتب الورقة اكتب ومليها وسلم على الديري لأحبابنا فيها